Good morning, afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome to today's panel, a discussion on human-centered workplace focusing on well-being to deliver results for people and for business. My name is Rod Hutchings. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, so it's like midnight here, and I'll be moderating today's great discussion. So if we can bring forward our panelists, please. And good morning or evening to you. Certainly evening here. We'll start the panel with an introduction from everyone, and we'll go around clockwise from the top and around. So over to Pam.
So good morning. My name is Pamela. I am a senior HR director for a company called Turnpoint Services, and just thrilled to be here to talk about this. Thanks. Oh, I'm based in Tampa. Sorry, didn't tell you that.
Based in where, sorry?
Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
Well, so it is good morning.
I'm sure it's not midnight there then.
No, sir.
No. Okay, and next.
Hi, Rod. Good to see you. Hi, everyone. I'm Malvika Jetmalani. I'm based in Chicago. I'm the co-founder of Atlas Group, which is a human capital advisory firm driven by the core belief that to win in the marketplace, you have to win in the workplace.
Thank you. And Lindsay.
Good morning, everyone. Lindsay Garrido. I'm based in Westchester County, New York. I am an HR and people leader, been in HR for about 20 years now, and looking forward to this conversation with the group here today.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charmaine. Good morning. I am in New York, and I am the founder and CEO of Chapter 2 LLC, which is an organizational leadership and people development consultancy that really centers people.
Well, that sounds very appropriate. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aisha Lawali. I am a corporate well-being and culture advisor based in Tampa, Florida, too. Super excited to be here.
Excellent. So welcome, everyone. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So I thought we'd start the day if we just let's just talk about the importance of well-being, which is pretty critical. So my first question is pretty straightforward: is why do we think that employee well-being is really crucial, critical for business success? So it's fairly broad question, and maybe I'll pick on Lindsay to start us off, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, first it's caring about people. And I think that's first and foremost. The people are the heart of our organizations and what we do. There's no business, there's no success without our people. And it's really important to care about them as people, as humans. I think it's great that we're seeing this shift in HR where organizations are rebranding to people and culture, whatever it may be, to really emphasize that we're not just headcount, we're not just employees, but we are humans and we are people. And with that comes everyone's dealing with challenges in life, different stages of life, and everyone brings something with them when they do come to work or when they show up for work. And so as organizations, we have a huge responsibility on our hands to care for them and make sure that we're taking care of them in the best way possible and that we are supporting them however we can. Since our conversation today is centered around business results too, I think that for me, it's important that this isn't a nice to have. You know, it's been a hot topic for several years now, but it's not just a trend. This is a business imperative, and organizations really do need to prioritize caring about well-being, creating really robust well-being programs and initiatives for their employees. And they're asking for it, and it's out there. There's a lot that's out there. You go on Indeed, one of the largest job searching sites, you look up a company profile, and the very first thing you see on that company page is a well-being score. So companies are now being rated on sites by employees, by candidates for well-being. So I think we're seeing a really important shift going on right now. And the American Psychological Association had a really interesting study last year in 2023. And one of the first highlights of that study was that 92% of people care about their organization showing that they support and care about their mental health and well-being. So I think that today's conversation is really poignant.
Wow, that's a great start. Thank you. Anyone want to add on to that? Why it's important?
I think I'd like to just add here that, while we have started having this conversation and bringing it to the forefront, I think that's excellent. Companies that have focused on employee well-being have constantly outperformed those that haven't. I mean, if you look back to companies that have rated in the top 100 best companies to work, they outperform in the S&P 500 by nearly 2-1. And this is over the past 25 years. So this is not some new, discovery that we're just kind of talking about it more. And finally, HR is being heard, and our people, quite frankly, thanks to this, are much more empowered to say, look, this is what I need, this is what I want, and if you don't give it to me, I'm going to find someone who's going to.
Yeah, that's so true. Anyone else before we move on? All right, so I think it is crucial, and both really answered that really well. I'm just wondering, and if I go to Pam on, can you share some examples of how well-being, like how you've seen it being experienced, how it's positively impacted any organisations you've helped out in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for saying in the past, because this is my role at TurnPoint is still pretty new. I'm in the onboarding phase, but I've been lucky enough to work at organizations where well-being has always been a key focus, even before it became the hot topic. And I think some of the measurable outputs that we see are obviously there's the low-hanging fruit, right? So you've got, employees are healthier overall. They take fewer sick days. We see higher engagement scores. We see higher performance rates. We see lower instances of burnout. So all those things are really great. They're all tangible. They're all measurable. I think what I love to see is where I have leaders at every level who are more invested in their employees' well-being as a whole. And it's not just a means to an end. It's actually there's a relationship there that comes out of actually caring about their teams as human beings versus, as a stack set of like, okay, here's what we have to get done. And so I think the relationships really do, tend to make the culture even more resilient, even more vibrant. And so those, to me, are the most important outputs of it.
No, that's really good. And I'm wondering, I might come to you, Charmaine, on this one next, is that, I mean, this particular panel is part of our mental health month. And so I'm just curious on what your thoughts would be on what role does mental health play in the overall wellbeing strategy of an organisation? Like, how does that?
Thank you. I mean, it plays a critical role, and in echoing, what has already been shared, a lot of times we are focusing on the productivity of people in the business. And the reality is if more leaders and organizations actually paid attention to productivity stats, they would pay more attention to this, right? Because when you think about this, right, the WHO, I think they said a couple of years ago that depression and anxiety is costing $1 trillion US each year, primarily in reduced productivity. 1 trillion is more than the GDP of some countries combined. And this is what we are willingly losing every year because we are not centering the mental health and well-being of our employees. So for the question about what role does it play, not only does it play a role in the health and the well-being of employees, it's directly impacting our ability to produce, to innovate, to create job opportunities, to create sustainability for people. So if organizations really think about this, it's not just about the health of their people, it's about the health of their business and the viability of their business.
No, that's, again, so true.
Can I add on to that too, Rod? Something I think is
definitely
really interesting too is and I just reading an article about this last week in preparation for our call today. And there's always been this tendency, not always, there's been a tendency to say, how do we help our employees become more resilient? How do we help them become, so the onus has always been on the employees. And, my last role where I'm at now, I'm trying to flip that script and say, what are we doing as employers to support our employees more effectively and to make the work, can we take away the work? Can we make it less stressful? Sometimes we can, right? Are we asking too much? Have we spread folks too thin? Everybody's being asked to do more with less. That's sort of thematically why we're seeing so much burnout. So I think, we really need to look at ourselves as employers and think about, how are we working on becoming employers of choice and creating safe, healthy, well-being centered spaces for our people.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, one of the things that I try to do when advising clients is really think about, HR has a perspective, our people are their voices are loud and clear. And then you do have the decision makers who have to think financially and have that kind of hard-nosed attitude as to what's the bottom line. In preparation for the call, I was looking at statistics, and I think the number is, if I'm not mistaken, for every $1 you spend on well-being programs, you save about $3.5 on your healthcare costs per employee. So just from a financial perspective, this makes sense to look at from a business and say, look, we need to really invest in this.
Yeah, that's pretty compelling numbers, aren't they? That's for sure. Just a, question for anyone. So I think we're quite grounding how this is really critical, and we've talked about numbers and business results. About how is it when we've got, employees in a good space? How does that actually help, really, at the interface of the employee with the customers and customer satisfaction? So just that sort of dimension to it as well. Anyone want to start that one?
So we know now from research, right, that your well-being and including your mental health is highly impacted by your manager, more so than your spouse. And we know that well-being doesn't happen in the doctor's office, right? It happens where we spend the majority of our waking hours, which is in the workplace. And so if you think about the fact that employees on the front lines are intimately familiar with not only your customers, but your products and your processes, they know the ins and outs. They're the ones running the businesses, right? Not the executives in the ivory tower. And so if you have healthy, happy employees, they're going to be productive employees, and they're going to show up to work and bring their best selves to work every day, which automatically and organically results in better customer satisfaction, better NPS, whatever kind of your client satisfaction or retention metrics are.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Anyone else want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think we know that happy employees are more engaged. More engaged people are more productive. More productive people are more innovative, and more innovation leads to more profits. So there's a direct tie that we often forget, right? And if we think about a company like Amazon is worth a lot. And one of the things that Jeff Bezos was really known for was being obsessive about the customer experience. So if we have real life example, and yes, there's a whole bunch of things we could say about them as a company, but from when it started and how successful they became, he was very obsessive about what is the customer experience, and look at what their market share and evaluation is. There's a real life example.
That's very, very true. All right. So I think we've established that it's important. That's really what I was aiming to do for the start of the conversation. Now I'm wondering about, how do we go about, what are some of the things that we can do about that? So, what specific strategies we've normally got a number of HR professionals on the call, companies, what can they do to help implement and foster a culture of prioritizing well-being? And I'll come to Lindsay for that one. to start with?
Sure.
Start us off.
Yeah. So any organization I've been to, number one, the employee assistance program, as I say, is sitting on the shelf collecting dust. And for me, that's always one thing to get out there and start making sure that it's utilized. We all struggle with utilization of our EAP programs. And for me, I've had some really great partners in those EAP programs that aren't just about mental health or the counseling sessions that are part of it. And I use that to build into well-being as a continuous conversation. So that's what I will do in every organization, is make sure that we are providing resources and communicating on a regular basis, that we are sharing resources with employees, really extracting out of all of our benefits and programs and all of the providers and carriers that we partner with. They offer a lot of resources. It could be newsletters, it could be free counseling sessions. So there's really a lot there, and it's just a matter of getting it in front of employees and oversharing, over communicating. So some of those partners have newsletters, as I mentioned. So I'm on a regular basis every month sharing newsletters, communications via email or through our HR system, to just make sure that employees know what's available to them and that they have support. And then tying it into, maybe if there's a certain theme of the month, we're in Mental Health Awareness Month. Last month was stress awareness. So those are ways to engage employees, maybe tailor the content that you're sharing in different tools and information that can be of value to them. And then just making sure that it's really holistic. So everyone's dealing with something different. Everyone's well-being needs something different. So really, as an organization, structuring your well-being program to make sure that it hits various pillars, not just our mental well-being, but also our physical, our financial, our social, some even add spiritual. So how can we really hit all of those areas in terms of our well-being program and strategy, weave that into our communications and our programs, and just make sure that employees see how much the organization really cares for them in terms of, like I said, making it a continuous conversation. This isn't just something that, they hear about in a benefits guide or one time a year. No, we're talking about it all the time because it's really important.
Can I add on to that for a second?
Yeah, please do.
Lindsay, I love everything you said. I think it's so critical, and you've hit all the input points. I think I will add on to that. Making sure that you've got executive sponsorship is key. Whether you're a frontline manager that's working with your direct employees, or an HR manager or leader, I think we need the weight and the gravitas that an executive sponsor will bring to it. And making sure that they understand that it is a holistic approach, to Lindsay's point. I think having a well-defined communication plan is important. If it feels like we're just sort of throwing things out as they come up, it doesn't feel organized, then we're not going to land well. So I think what we try to do where I've been is to meet employees where they are, think about the communication mechanism that we're using. If you've got field employees, are they sitting at a desk, not going to look at an intranet, right? So we've got an app that will push messages out. Just really trying to think about ways of again, meeting people where they are, and to Lindsay's really important point, being inclusive about how we're thinking about and communicating wellness initiatives, to make sure that we're not just assuming that it's whoever can take the most steps, or who's lost the most weight, or who's fill in the blank. We want to meet people where they are.
No, that really brings. Sorry, go on. Yes, please.
I think it's important also to think about, your company and what you are able to offer, depending on the size of the organization. Some companies can't afford an EAP program. Yes. So it's about being creative. Maybe you actually develop an internal capability where you have mental health first aiders who are certified and developed internally, who can offer support in times of crisis. It also could be that you have policies, and as Lindsay and Pam both mentioned, it's creating that awareness and letting people know what is available to them, how they can access it. And I think one thing that is super, super important, and this really falls on us as HR folks, to make sure that policies are super supportive of what we're saying we want for our people, and that they are implemented. I can't tell you the number of times I have, been a part of projects where people are like, yeah, this policy exists, but really nobody follows it. So how are you making sure that what we're saying we want is actually what we're making happen for our people? And then finally, as you both mentioned, kind of creating that bespoke program where you are constantly measuring and seeing, is what worked yesterday working today? Because as our workforce goes through different phases of their lives, as new people come in, as new technology arises, your needs are going to be very different. So if we're trying to implement what we did 5 years ago today, it's not exactly going to be very relevant.
No, that's really true. And I might just pick on, just extend a little bit of what I think, Pam, you might have mentioned this, it's really important. And I mean, in the last few days, I've ran a whole panel on this about being inclusive and accessibility. So so you mentioned that it was important that they are inclusive. What are some ways, I guess briefly, it's not going to be a whole panel on it, but about being inclusive and accessible, so it's for all employees? What are some ideas about that? And that can go to anyone.
I think one strategy is to use recognition. I think recognition can be a powerful tool, and we may not sort of intuitively think about recognition as being linked to well-being, but we know from research that recognition is a strong driver of belonging. And when I feel like I belong and that I'm making a meaningful impact, then that automatically has a positive impact on my well-being. So when you think about recognition, it's also important to pay attention to the behaviors that you're recognizing, and are you being inclusive? So for example, if you talk the talk about well-being, but you're constantly recognizing those people who are pulling hero hours and all-nighters to put out fires, then you're very clearly sending a clear message about what you care about. And so, I think Aisha alluded to this a little bit. It's important to not just kind of say these things on paper, because it can become very easy for it to sit on an office wallpaper and for it to be exactly that. But for it to really be embedded into your culture. And I would say the other way to make sure you're being inclusive is to ask employees, just like we would gather VOC, or voice of the customer, when you're developing a product roadmap or developing new products. It's important to gather VOE, or voice of the employee, when you're building these programs, to make sure that you are meeting the needs of people and they do feel that these things are inclusive and accessible.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Anyone else
I
want
think
to add
one
on
of
to that? Yes.
I'll jump in a little bit because I know I added that
Yes.
question super early in your morning, Rod. Sorry. I think one of the things that I think about is when you Google, we were all Googling, I'm sure, wellness programs, right? And inevitably what pops up is a thin, light-skinned female looking like the epitome of health, right? And so when I think about what wellness looks like to me and to my employees, it needs to represent a diverse view of what that means. It can't just be this cookie cutter image, that if you sign up for this program, or if you take these pills or do this exercise map, or finish this exercise roadmap, that you're going to have a six-pack of abs and be healthy. I think, again, it goes back to my earlier point about meeting people where they are and making sure that people can see themselves in these and can understand that they can develop their own idea of what success means. And as long as it's meaningful to them, that's great. I think the other key piece of this that I'll add on is really equipping our managers with how to foster an environment that encourages wellness in an inclusive way. And it's not just about, I've had managers that have been like, we're having a step competition and really pushing, guys, did you get your 15,000 steps in a day this week? And, most of this, I'm sure this call can maybe can do that, right? Not everybody can. So, and we leave people behind, best of intentions, but I think just giving our managers some more mindfulness and awareness around it, I think will go a long way to building more inclusive wellness programs.
Yeah. If I may add, I think it's really important to step back and recognize that all of this starts with education, right? A lot of the times we're not educating our workforce about what it means. And I really appreciate the point you made, Aisha, about the sometimes people don't have the resources within the organization, right? A lot of times we're talking about things from highly resourced organizations. There are HR teams of one. There are if I think about a not-for-profit, they may, and even if they're not, if they just don't have the resources, they don't have all these resources. So what are some of the other ways that we can partner through education? Are there groups or organizations within our local communities that offer or support mental health or overall well-being and wellness of people, because employees are peoples, that we can partner with? Maybe they would be willing to do a free workshop just to say that we're a client or whatever that is. There's so many other ways outside of the traditional ways we think about it. And also, a lot of times when we're talking about well-being, we focus so much on physical. Well-being is about emotional health, spiritual health, societal health. We have to also extend that as organizations to broaden outside of the steps and the aerobic class, right? Because looking at someone, you cannot tell if they're a picture of health. There's some people that, unfortunately, we live in a society where body weight is what equates to health or what someone perceives as that. And that is not the case, right? And I really think that we have to do a much better job of educating holistically on what wellness and well-being actually means. Then we need to connect that to what does our organization need based on our population of people. Now that we've educated, what do we need to drill down into? And then how do we tap into, whether internally or externally through local or community support, to help support? Because the African proverb, it takes a village, right? We need to exercise that and take a village approach to well-being within the workplace. And too often we're focusing internally. And the last thing I will share is I do have an identical twin sister, and she is a licensed mental health practitioner. I will say that the thing that has worried me the most when we talk about well-being is that we have HR practitioners who are not subject matter experts, who are not licensed, lead in these conversations. That's very dangerous. We are the ones tasked with leading discussions. We get offended when people think HR is just easy to do. But we are now leading conversations around mental health and wellness, and we're not equipped to. And what I've learned so much from my sister is that you are opening Pandora's box, and we're actually causing more harm. So when I see even leaders talking about this from the, just do X perspective, I also think the education needs to be, how do we level up ourselves and partner with people who are actually licensed and practiced to lead some of these conversations? Because an employee comes to you, great, I can listen, but I'm not a licensed mental health practitioner. And we need to do a better job too, sometimes, of pushing back and saying, no, we're not therapists. We're not. That's not what we're trained to do. And even if we are therapists in a life somewhere, we're not being paid and hired in the capacity of therapists at this job to act in that way. So I think the education piece also needs to come out from, how are we as HR educating the people around us to adjust their expectations of what we're supposed to do, even within this space, because it cannot be the sole responsibility of HR to focus on well-being at an organization.
There was lots of
I
points
feel like
in that.
Charmaine just had a mic drop
Lots of good
moment.
points.
That was amazing, Charmaine. And I extra love the point about engaging with your community resources and bringing them in. Because to your point, yes, I've been the HR department of one. I think probably all of us have at some point. And we're not the kitchen sink, right? We can't be all things to all people. So I think it's brilliant to talk about bringing in local resources, connecting our employees with the places that can actually provide the support and the help that are needed. Great call out.
And I guess the point that it's not all about physical health, how you look or how fit you are. I think mental health is very much also about being mindfulness, and that can come just from. I guess my next question was going to be, what are some other low cost initiatives that are possible? But yeah, I think just being mindful and how you talk with one another is just a simple thing. I think about simple things, just turning the mobile phone off, I think. But has anyone got any other ideas about just simple things that the HR department of one can do?
What you just mentioned in terms of some of the low cost things you can do. And I think it kind of ties back into what was said previously. When we think about things like inclusivity with this new way of working, and we have people who are working remotely from various ethnic, culture, educational backgrounds, it is important to have that level setting of an understanding of what is the norm. What are these things that we're talking about? For example, I recently ran a campaign for someone around the concept of unconscious bias. And because I had so many various, I had a very, very diverse group of people, that meant different things to different folks. And in fact, some people didn't understand what it meant at all. And so when we're saying that we want to be inclusive, to be fair to everybody, we have to make sure that everybody's at the same level. So that education piece is absolutely vital. And then in terms of things that we can then do, we can, as Charmaine mentioned, look at that community support, but also internally, we can encourage things like employee resource groups where employees will come together and create various affinity groups depending on, their interests or their needs or whatnot. And we can, as HR, make other employees aware that they exist, or how to create one, encourage them, get them executive sponsorship or external sponsorship or things like that. Other things that we can do very practically is we make sure that we are constantly looking at the way we're doing our job design. Is it something that can be work from home or work remotely or job sharing? That's expertise that does lie within HR for us to be able to do that organizational design. We also can implement things like mental health days within our policies, and that does come a little bit of a cost to the organization, but still it's something that we can work out. And again, as I mentioned earlier, when we look at EAP programs or employee assistance programs, they are very costly. So how can you build that capability internally, whether it's leveraging external resources who can come in for certain amounts of time or whatnot. And then when you do talk about wellness programs, as we all hit on, it isn't just your physical well-being, because depending on your circumstance in life, your socioeconomic status, where you are in the world, you might need help with financial planning. How do you plan for the death of a spouse and managing a will? And, if you're not financially literate, how do you do things like that? So I think really it boils down to that education and then understanding from your people what they need. And that, as I mentioned earlier, that need is going to change. So constantly doing that check-in, and it is okay to pivot and educate your leadership that things will change, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think the whole idea of, I think we've heard right throughout this, we're almost halfway through, we've heard the word people used often. And I think, that's that people-centric view, isn't it? So now just picking up on something that was mentioned, is that we're still in a place where we have a very hybrid way of working. We still have lots of people, still in different industries working remotely, working at home. So across an organization where we've got this hybrid work model, is there ways that technology we can leverage? What can we do to help promote wellness when we've got this in this hybrid world that we are in today, which is something new, I guess? Who'd like to give that one a go?
I think one straightforward and I think fairly simple thing to look at is whether you're using Outlook, Google Meet, Zoom, whatever meeting technology you're using, is just to look at how much time your employees are spending in meetings. There was a study done recently that showed that workers are spending 60% of their time on work about work. So meetings, follow-ups, emails, more meetings, the meeting after the meeting before the meeting. And one of the stats that this study showed is that in larger companies especially, you're losing upwards of $100 million every year because of people spending time in meetings. And this is one area I think that employers and employees will unanimously agree on, and meeting effectiveness is really under scrutiny right now. So this is just one very easy stat to look at, and just to sit down with your teams and people and just help prune their calendars. And it also, by the way, helps people prioritize and reorient themselves toward the things that are truly important for the business and drive outcomes in those areas. So it's good for well-being and it's good for business.
Yeah, one thing that's in my mind, is in this context of where we've got this hybrid work, we've got people at work, and they might be able to go out and have coffee and have these pre-chats, and you go into this virtual meeting. How do we make the people that are working at home still feel like they also belong? So do we, the idea of when you start a virtual meeting, are we just getting straight into the business, or are we having some sort of human to human conversation, that sort of thing? Is anyone got any thoughts of that?
So if I
Or
may share
experience?
a personal story, I have been working remotely, probably like many people, since COVID. And I have had different experiences. I've had experiences where I felt like, depending on my manager, I think it was Malvika who mentioned your manager really does make or break your experience. So depending on the manager that I had, I felt very included. I felt part of a team, and they did very simple things like starting a WhatsApp group, checking on you, being like, hey, I know you have a birthday coming up. I hope you're, taking some time for yourself. Little things like that cost nothing except for a moment of your time. Really made the difference in my productivity and in how I felt as a member of the team. And then the same technology was used by different people who didn't take that time, who were just like, this is what we got to do. This is what we got to do. And I realized the difference. And sitting on the other side of it as an HR person, I realized, oh, this is where the education of the manager has to come in to say, look, you need to take the time to check in on your people. It doesn't need to be a big fancy recognition ceremony. A simple like, hey, how you doing? That makes a difference, and it is free, so we don't need to have massive budgets to make a difference in the lives of our employees.
I think the manager education piece is critical, and I tend to be very, very protective of my own team. So even though I might not be, I might be up at 11:30 and I'll have an idea and I'll shoot an email. I won't send it. I'll schedule it. I've had the bosses where you wake up in the morning and you've got 16 emails waiting, and it's all like, where's this? What's that? Who's this? And there's literally like a ball in the pit of your stomach before you even logged in for the day, right? And I don't ever want any of our employees to have that kind of feeling. So it is critical that managers are given the right toolkits, the right capability training, so that they understand the impact, the direct impact, and the scope of the impact they have on our employees' wellness, because it really can be as simple as taking that 3 minutes to check in. How are you? What can I do for you? Servant leadership tends to be an overused and a little bit archaic term now, but it really is investing in putting your people first. And we need to make sure that, I think, the best managers know how to do that intuitively. So we need to help the ones who don't get there.
And if I can just add just one thing that I think is very, very powerful, we all kind of talked about this, but communication, sharing stories of your employee, if it is in fact a hybrid workforce, sharing stories of your employees who are working from home, who are, working parents, and kind of that day in the life of, because I think there is some elements of misunderstanding of what it means to work remotely. I have been in meetings where I've heard people jokingly say, oh, they're working in their pajamas or they're sitting at the beach. And that stuff, while it may be in jest, does create a negative, just a negative environment around that type of work, when in fact this person may be extremely stressed and really doing far beyond what you think. So I think sharing those stories and humanizing each other to each other using our communication tools is absolutely important. And today, the technology that we have at our disposal is unbelievable. We just have to get in there and use it.
No, it's so true. And I was talking to one of my best friends actually earlier today, and he had a meeting with like the CEO of one of our largest telecom companies this week, and he was just saying how like all the C-suite, they're all in t-shirts and all very relaxed, and it was something that was unexpected to him, but that probably is a good example that it's really can filter everywhere. That was an organization that's probably got 90,000 employees at it, but they're all nice and relaxed, and so should everybody. Just picking up on, I guess, one point is that something that I've noticed with some people in my circle is that sometimes there's almost like some fear that when they're working at home, that they need to be near their computer. They're checking their emails, so if a notification comes in, they're ready to go for it. And I worry that that's not really good for well-being. That we're so on edge. Has anyone else got any thoughts, around that? So, are we in a position where is it just this communication, like what you're talking about, and education needed around that? What are your thoughts around that little challenge?
Yes. Family, gonna go?
No,
Yes, this thing drives me absolutely nuts, this mindset. And I actually wrote an essay last year on this that I called Assumptions Impact, Retention. And it really speaks to this. A lot of times we're making assumptions about people, and I know it's a human default, but I think a big part is how do we work on our own biases, because that's what is grounded in. So when you talk about inclusivity, to go back to that, part of it is that we keep talking about being inclusive, but we're not checking ourselves about the biases that are attached to the assumptions we're making. That is a huge opportunity we're missing in terms of creating a culture of well-being, creating a culture of productivity and innovation, and creating a culture of inclusivity, right? So what I'm often fascinated by, and I've had clients, because I left corporate America, but even when I was in and then leave it, who say things like, oh, the person at home isn't working. Do you know how many times when I was in an office, I'd passed employees sitting in a conference room, just chatting away? Or, I had one employee who would watch, streaming. So we need to disconnect this thought that work equals being in an office, because someone can equally waste your dollars and time sitting in an office as they can doing so at home. So, and the same way in the office as a human, you're going to need a bio break. So you're not going to be by your computer. But what I don't understand is why, if someone is down the hallway chatting it up with someone for 2 hours, how that is any different from someone being away from their desk for 15 to 20 minutes. They're still not at their desk, but we are somehow assigning where they're located to their dedication. We all have worked at companies where employees have shown up and not done anything in the office. So we really need to detach this, because inclusivity is around how do I help people engage in the way that works for them, their styles, not we are paying all of this money for office space that's not being used. So now I'm going to be draconian. What I know is human behavior. And whenever we tell people, even go think about the US and prohibition, we told people you cannot drink. Then they found ways to do it, and the issues got worse. So whenever we try to tell people they cannot do something and be draconian about it, we get the results that we don't want. So inclusivity also has to balance more around how are we creating spaces for people, and how do we check our own biases and the assumptions, right? People are, and I love what Aisha said before about, the how are you? That was part of what I wrote. Gallup had put a report out that said we lose $1 trillion, I think it is, in the US every year due to people voluntarily leaving the company. And when I read this full report, the thing that got me, it's that 52% of the people said their managers could have prevented their exit. And the most important part for me of that was 51% said in the 3 months before they resigned, no one checked in on them. And I read this whole thing, and my takeaway was, oh, so we are okay losing $1 trillion a year for 3 words. How are you?
Doesn't take much, does it? All right, so we might move on to another. So we've spoken about how important this is. We've spoken about some suggestions about how to implement, and now I'm just wondering. Let's just talk about how do we measure what we've implemented. How do we what are some ways to start thinking about measuring the value and showing that value, I guess, back to the business? What are some ideas people can do for that? I'd like to start us on that one.
I think immediately you need to be looking at what you're implementing and why. And what I mean specifically is, for example, if you know that you have a specific healthcare cost, that your data is showing that your people are utilizing this particular offering, then your well-being offerings should be tackling that, right? And then you measure it based on that. Is that coming down? Is it going up? There needs to be matrices that you are looking at, whether it's engagement, whether it's productivity, and your solutioning should be around that. Or if it's something that you captured from employee voice, if they're saying we need more of X, we need childcare facilities, we need whatever it may be, you use that metric to then say, well, we're going to develop this program because of this, and we're going to track that to make sure it's either going up or going down depending on that.
I think too, if you're getting those resources, those financial resources and that buy-in from your leaders in your organization to invest in programs, whatever that may be, really tracking the utilization is important. That can be a way that you show ROI on what you've invested in your people. And it, will take some time, 6 months, a year, to kind of see what that looks like. But also along the way, you can see if utilization is down, how can we do better? How can we get this in front of employees more? How can we open it up so that they understand why this is so important or so valuable to them? And that way you can course correct down the road so that those metrics can change, and then you can present your leadership with something strong to say, we've had a really great response to this. Employees are engaging, they are utilizing it. Going back to the EAP, in 11 months in my most recent role, I was able to triple the usage, and it's still low, but I took that as a win. I got so many more people to use it. If 10 people in the year, I was able to see, not who they were, but the number who specifically used the counseling sessions. I took that as a win. For me, that meant that 10 people got help, 10 people got support in whatever way that they needed. And I think that sometimes those numbers, they might be small, but they're still impactful. And we see so many surveys. There's so many great studies. There's so many great surveys out there. Use that as inspiration for your own employee surveys. There's mental health indexes, well-being scores. There's some really great questions that are in some of the studies that go out to the broader population. How can you use those same questions for your own employees and then start tracking that so that then you can measure those metrics over time as well and really see the response to your initiatives?
I think often just like sort of HR has always been looked at, oh, HR, you're going to fix our culture, right? I also think HR is like, oh, you're going to fix our well-being, right? So I think I said this earlier, but I like flipping the script a little bit. So I want to put it back on my managers. So number one is again, getting that executive sponsorship is really key, but I also getting to baseline and sharing, communicating the information out so that your managers all know, here's where we're starting from. They know the why. They understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Like, they feel like they're part of the process. Hopefully we've brought them along. And so they feel like our managers are invested, which is then easier to help them have the same level of investment in each of their employees. And so based on that, it's just sort of like any other project for me in terms of establishing which KPIs are we going to follow along. We've got baseline. What are we really trying to solve for? And those are I try to focus on 3 KPIs. And I've been lucky enough to have senior leadership teams where we've been able to tie it back to, yes, senior leader, this is really important that we're delivering on revenue, but we're also going to look at these KPIs. We're also going to look at your engagement scores, and that's going to be part of how your success as a leader is measured. So tying all that back so that it's not an HR job to make wellness important, right? It falls to every single person within the organization.
No, I think what you're saying is so correct, isn't it? So really, well-being is really everyone's responsibility. It's not just a HR bit. It is so critical, and that needs to be understood and needs to be lived. Needs to be the lived experience of everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
And we have to role model it. If we are being draconian in our own teams, and I love what you said, Pam, about, you have that idea at 11 o'clock at night, but you should not be sending out that email.
No. So I wonder, I mean, maybe building on that in a little way, what are some mistakes, common mistakes organizations make when measuring the impact of wellbeing programs? So what is the opposite, the best practice? What are some of the bad practice?
I think one of the most common mistakes is kind of jumping to the programming immediately. And yes, the yoga classes and the meditation apps and all of that is super, super important. Looking at utilization of the offerings that you do have on the table is super important. But I think well-being really needs to be embedded in the culture. And so what can you do to embed it into every fiber of the culture? It kind of goes back to what Pamela was saying, right? Think of it as a strategic imperative, because your strategic imperatives have a direct impact on your bottom line. And what would you do to make strides on a strategic imperative? Well, you would start at the top. You would get alignment from the CEO and the executive team and make sure that they are championing it. The other thing I think that organizations really need to pay attention to is the habits that they're inculcating in their employees. So, I've worked with many tech companies, and I worked with a tech company one time that said all of the right things about well-being, but when they would cater breakfast, it was always donuts and chocolate chip muffins and pizza for lunch, and the snacks in the pantry were always chips and candy. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't live our lives and not have, I love a good pizza once in a while, but when you are normalizing a burnout culture, and when you are normalizing eating sugar and pizza every day, you're not really investing in the health and well-being of your employees. I mean, we all know the old quote, food, let food be thy medicine. Food is supposed to give us nutrients and energy, right? So that people can do their best work and show up in their best way. It's not supposed to leave them feeling depleted. So I think that is one very straightforward thing that everyone can start doing, is just focus on the food that you're putting in front of people.
I love this question because in my mind, I'm like, so many opportunities here. I think one of the biggest mistake, well, there are several, but I also think it's focusing on the wrong metrics. A lot of times that we are just thinking, what did they get out of this? How many people use this versus of the people that are using it, how has that increased, right? What is the qualitative piece that is also supporting the quantitative piece as well? I also think that we don't educate people, like, going back to taking a step back, we all might have different perceptions of what we believe a positive outcome is, but we have to have clarity and align up front and help educate people, and then be willing to readjust if we need to about why this is a new focus. It was said earlier, what works 5 years ago is not working today. So how are we adjusting for where we are today? Because as you increase awareness, and as you're getting the types of results that you were looking for the original metrics, you now need new metrics, because where you are now, where you've gotten to, becomes your new baseline. And if you want a new baseline, you have to adjust. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and it's not just on HR, but how do we help educate people, including leaders and ourselves, on how we can shift to better support the culture so that we're measuring the things that matter at that moment.
I love that. And can I plus one on something that you said, because it goes back to education and bias. As someone who's now in their mid-50s, as someone who's lost over 60 pounds and still on my weight loss journey, like ageism and being like that whole discrimination against people that are obese is very alive and well, unfortunately. And so it goes back to, and there's mental health issues that are also part of these biases that are issues. But like, those are just the first two topics that came to my mind. I think we need to really focus on coaching, developing, educating managers, and being aware of bias and being aware of the impact of those biases on their employees. Because everyone's got great intentions, but what they don't know is what people's realities are like at home. If somebody's dealing with cancer and that's why they look like they put on 30 pounds, or if somebody, who knows? There's a million reasons that we don't need to know. What we need to do is provide a place that is safe, a place that is supportive, and a place that meets people where they are in a way that is meaningful to them.
Absolutely.
No, it's true. I think what Charmaine mentioned as well before about you just can't make assumptions about people, can you? So building on, we've talked about managers, and it's really everybody's sort of part of wellness. I'm just wondering, what strategies can we employ to engage employees who are resistant to really being part of wellness activities? How do we help them see the value, I guess?
If I may, this question is interesting to me because I feel that the resistance either comes from the fact that it is not relevant to them, or they have wholeheartedly stepped into it and we have failed them. And what I mean specifically is oftentimes we offer things to our employees, such as surveys, asking them for their voice, and then they take the time to give us their voice, we capture it, and it falls into a black hole, and they don't know what happened. So I would say if you are facing resistance, you need to check: is this relevant? Is it time? Is it timely? Is it relevant to now? Have I executed a little too late? And then check in and figure out why. Because I don't think there's anybody in the world who comes to work and says, today I'm going to have a terrible day. I really want to be disengaged, and watch me win at that. So I think that when there is resistance, we have to take a minute to understand why. If there is utilization problems, we have to understand maybe it's technologically just not easy to get into the app that you're providing. And so really having that curiosity and asking why is probably your best bet when it comes to figuring it out.
Yeah. And not personalizing it. So then I just add not personalizing it because, to Pamela's point too, there are external factors that may be happening that have nothing to do with the organization. And we are looking at these data points and spinning our wheels and trying to have all these response strategies when sometimes it really has nothing to do with it. For example, if I think about COVID and when it first hit, I don't think people are so focused on what they were dealing with in their own personal lives. That was not the time to push all these well-being things at work. They probably would have been lower usage, right? So we have to give that credit too. And then the last thing I wanted to add, I forgot to mention before, is that part of the problem sometimes becomes that we are inconsistent in that data collection. And because of that inconsistency, people don't know what direction to go. So it's almost like the story of the boy who cried wolf. Like, now you're ready, I'm done, because I'm exhausted by all the activities, the starts and stops, because the data that we have been inconsistent in collecting is telling different stories. So I don't know what direction to go.
All right. So we've got 3 minutes to go. Like, that's just crazy. I can't believe how fast these sessions go. So we'll just, I guess, finish off, go around our virtual room, and just, if you want to just share again, what's one key takeaway you'd like to leave with the people listening today? So might as well start with you, Pam, and we'll go virtually around clockwise again.
No. Okay.
You don't like that? Sorry.
It's okay. I think for me, the big takeaway is education. HR doesn't make culture. We don't make well-being. I think we need to look to our managers and build accountability and capabilities there, in order for us to build out really meaningful and impactful well-being programs that our employees will want to use and will benefit from.
Very good. Agree 100%. And next.
For me, it's really clear that well-being and profit are not at odds. They, one drives the other, and you can't have one without the other. It's really employees driving outcomes. We don't have magical elves doing all of the work. It's people at the end of the day. And I think it was Aisha who said, for every dollar that you invest in well-being, you get returns of over 3x. So it's really that for me. Well-being and profit are not at odds.
Yeah, really good.
I would say that don't forget about the family. Don't forget about who's at home. We talk so much about the employee, but well-being comes from the household, and it could be something with their spouse or their partner or their children. And if you are investing in programs, really make sure that they reach the household, that they reach family members as well, that family members can be covered, and that they're taking advantage of those resources. And also, when we talked about communication, that was one of our highlights, education and communication. How are we reaching those that are at home? How are we getting information and those resources also in the hands of our employees, partner, spouse, children, who can really benefit from some of that, as well, as they're probably struggling even more so and impacting that employee's well-being.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I'd say modeling, right? And I saw that Carrie Blackman in the comments put that, and that was mine. I actually made a post today that was scheduled that says actions, not words, communicate intent. So we need to model as leaders, as HR, what we're asking people to do. If we're saying center your well-being, then those emails can't come at 6 a.m. on the weekend, and we can't tell people to take time off, and then they know we're on vacation and we're messaging them every day, right? We have to model what we're asking people to do. And if we're telling them we want to center their well-being, then we have to actually demonstrate that.
I think for me, it's two things that I'd like to close with. I think one is, from an HR perspective, listen to your people. They know what they need, they know what they want, and then what they care about. And then also from a personal perspective, we are employees as well. We are people as well. It's super important to take care of your well-being first, because if you're not okay, you can't help everybody else. And if enough of us create those boundaries, then you're going to have a culture that is healthy and that is well and that is really, people centric. So please take care of yourself.
Well, yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks. What a great conversation. I think the summary sort of hit it where it belongs. Like, essentially, it's education, modeling. I love modeling, and communication and meeting people where they are. It's just so critical. So thanks everyone, and I look forward to sharing future panels with you in the near future. So thanks. Bye everyone.
You get some rest, Rod.
I will.
Take care.
It'll take a
Take
while.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you.